On August 1st, 2024, two members of the House of Councilors in Japan, Taro Yamada and Akamatsu Ken, showed up at Visa's headquarters in San Francisco unannounced. They did this because a new series of credit card policies from Visa appeared to be prohibiting lawful transactions between Japanese citizens and Japanese companies. A meeting was then held where they went over Visa's policy and regulations, and it was explained to them that it wasn't Visa that was behind this. In Taro Yamada's tweet, he says, "We received a clear statement from the head office manager that they have never issued instructions to restrict transactions using specific terms. These transactions, taking place in Japan, were made legally by Japanese citizens with Japanese companies." Was Visa telling the truth? Is anyone else terrified that no one outside of Visa, MasterCard, seems to understand how this process actually works? There is a lot of misinformation, so I spent the last few months researching this, which has even included training material used internally by Visa and MasterCard. So hopefully this will help shed some light on this problem that is affecting all of us. So I'm going to start with what these systems are called and how their current versions came to be. Then I'm going to go step by step through MasterCard's process. I'm then going to talk about some of the consequences of this process, intended or otherwise. And then finally, hopefully, we'll talk about what developers and consumers can do about it. This is a pretty serious topic and is going to touch on some of the most powerful and dangerous people in the world, so I'll need to be very careful about what I say and how I say it.
Yes, keeping you from being, canceled or assassinated is a pro. So I don't think you have the impact and the reach and the influence to get assassinated, but you can definitely get canceled.
Yeah, getting canceled is pretty easy now.
Not you're canceled by the masses. You'd be canceled by the corporations.
Yeah, and that sounds actually scarier.
Well, because that's the form of cancellation that's existed for a very long time.
Yeah.
This social canceling, that's a new form of cancellation. I mean, I guess the Greeks had, when they ostracized a person, but...
Oh, like banishment?
Yeah, they would, for like 10 years.
Yeah.
They'd take a vote and they'd be like, oh, you're out, boy.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I don't know if you can be banished now,
People sure talk like they are.
That's very true.
They're like, oh, my voice has been suppressed. And they're like, listened to like 80 million people. And it's like, you have an interesting definition of suppressed.
All right, so I'm going to go like what I said. I'm going to start with what these systems are called. And so you have the transactional processes like Visa. They have VIRP, which is the Visa Integrity Risk Program. And then you have other credit card companies such as Discover and American Express, and they have their own systems. However, in this podcast, I'm going to explain this in detail using MasterCard's system, BRAM, which means Business Risk Assessment and Mitigation Program, because it seems to be more aggressive in its enforcing, and MasterCard and Visa take up over 90% of credit card transactions.
Outside of China.
Yeah, outside of China. Yeah. That has to be clear.
China's its own ecosystem.
I'm not going to touch it.
I think that while Visa and MasterCard have their own enforcement, it seems like MasterCard has really been more aggressive with its policing over the last 5 years.
Yeah, and I'm going to go over... I made a video about this in 2021, and go over like how MasterCard...
Revisit some of that stuff?
Yeah, okay. And how that transaction process kind of cracked down and got more elaborate.
Okay. So you want to start with that?
Yeah. So in 2015, there was this sheriff, Thomas Dart, and he sent a letter to Visa and MasterCard asking them to cease their involvement with a website called Backpage.com. And in this letter, he wrote that sex trafficking is among the most pervasive and persistent of social evils, yet the unfettered proliferation of websites like Backpage.com has provided this violent industry with a mask of normalcy, driving demand ever higher and increasing the enslavement of prostituted individuals, including children. And then 2 days after this statement, MasterCard and Visa cut ties with Backpage. In 2017, it was found that Backpage knew that they had facilitated ads for underage trafficking. That same year, we had the Great Patreon crackdown.
First great Patreon crackdown.
Yeah, which many of you know. And it started a lot of panic in the adult content space. And Patreon started getting rid of multiple creators that didn't follow their new guidelines. They started drawing lines between anthropomorphic monsters and animals, what they considered to be non-consensual sexual scenarios, and they purged most anime-style art with that.
Which Steam does still today.
Yeah. And
in a sexual content.
Yes. Yeah. And then in 2018, you had FOSTA, which is the Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act, that was introduced. And their stated goal was to reduce human trafficking by amending Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act and holding internet platforms accountable for the content their users post, which did include MasterCard.
Yeah, it was weird how it included MasterCard because it was like... basically, MasterCard was going to be held accountable for transactions, potentially.
Yeah.
And even if they weren't, I think that MasterCard was incredibly embarrassed by this.
Yes.
And and I think that they just didn't want to deal with it.
From a company standpoint, that makes sense. Yeah.
And then what was it? Pornhub in 2020?
Yeah. In 2020, there was this opinion piece that was made, and it claimed that Pornhub's involvement with human trafficking, including child prostitution, and that had MasterCard. They were bombarded with people's complaints, and this led them to lead an internal investigation in December, and then they suspended all their business with Pornhub.
Yeah, I mean, they eventually came back, but the site as big as Pornhub losing credit cards is just that's like the kiss of death.
Yeah, it really was. And then in response to all of that, in April of 2021, MasterCard released a new and improved list of requirements for businesses, and those included 4 parts. 1, documented age and identity verification for all people depicted and those uploading the content. 2, a content review process prior to publication. 3, a complaint resolution process that addresses illegal or non-consensual content within 7 business days. And then 4, an appeals process allowing for any person depicted to request their content be removed. So basically, MasterCard got its ass kicked and built this elaborate system so what had happened over the last 4 years would not happen again.
And Bram existed before this.
Bram.
It was just... Yes. Okay, I'm not the one who makes up all these dumb names. Okay?
I know. It's better than VERP.
Bram existed before this, but it was expanded where it was originally supposed to be about, dealing with shady businesses and shady transactions and things that were illegal.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, there was this component of not hurting the brand.
Yeah.
Whatever the hell that means.
Yeah, whatever MasterCard wants it to be.
And the 4 things that are talked about here, if you look at how they're brought up, they are talking about real live humans. They're not talking about animated characters. They're not talking about DAS models. They're not talking about anything else like that. But however, I think this was a situation where they just didn't want to deal with the brand being hurt. So all of a sudden, I think they just said, okay, it's anything. If it's an artistic depiction, if it's a animated thing, if it's a DAS model, we don't care.
Yeah.
And
they were more worried about how they would be perceived by people.
Yeah. So do you want to go into how this process specifically works?
Yeah. So I actually have a what is this called? Like a chart?
You made a drawing.
A drawing.
Because you were watching internal videos and stuff, and
yeah.
their drawings. I didn't watch all the videos that you watched, but their drawings were like really confusing, and they tried to make it seem like it was great, and it was like really simplified, because I guess it's supposed to be 3 parts, but it's really a lot more than 3 parts.
Yeah. I have the 3 parts that are, you basically have 3 main parts of this transactional process. You have MasterCard, and then you have the acquirer, which is the payment service provider, and then you have the merchant.
Okay.
And these 3 things make up this elaborate system. And
now what I thought was interesting is we as the consumer, we're not part of this.
No, we're not. Yeah, I was surprised. I thought we were going to be merchants, but we're not. Well, I don't know.
So Patreon is a merchant.
Yes, Patreon's a merchant. Places like Steam, itch.io, DL Sites.
DL Site's a merchant.
Yeah.
And so when Patreon says, oh, it wasn't Visa or MasterCard who talked to us, it was the bank, that's the acquirer.
Yeah, that's the acquirer. They can also be PayPal, Venmo, Stripe, including banks. Yeah, all those things.
Yeah. So it's just interesting.
Yeah.
And I think what Visa was trying to do here is I think Visa was trying to separate themselves from the process, to give themselves a degree of, oh, we weren't the ones who said this. Because I think that the mistake that happened with Backpage and the issue that happened with Pornhub was they were taking an active role in the process. And I think that they saw that as the problem. If they create a way so that they're not taking an active role, they can lie to, Japanese government officials and be like, oh, it wasn't us. We don't know what happened. Oh, yeah. Please go back to Japan now. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. It was so it was so disrespectful. It was so disrespectful.
Really was. Yeah.
And I mean, okay, fine. They showed up and they didn't have an appointment. But come on. I mean, I think they probably reached, and now it could have been a publicity stunt. It could have been, we're gonna show up and we're gonna show things. It could be that they know what's going on and they're pretending they don't know. And are we gonna sit here and pretend that politicians are always doing and saying what they say they are? So we're taking them on faith that they are genuinely looking out for their constituents.
Yeah.
So let's look at this process from I know this is complicated and we want to make it easy. So let's say that we have a developer making a game on Patreon. How does this process work? Is it that somebody complains to Bram and that starts the investigation?
Well, that can be one of the things. Like an external source can do that, like global law enforcement, regulators, cardholders, religious groups. They can contact MasterCard and have this outside referral to them. But then it can also happen internally. And actually, most of these investigations are internally. So what happens is that Bram will try to buy a game, let's say on Patreon, like what you said. They will see if they can access the prohibited material on Patreon. And if that transaction comes back positive, they will contact the acquirer and notify them of the violation. They will also ask the acquirer to investigate their own internal investigation and report back to MasterCard. And that investigation, the one that the acquirer does, is the first time that Patreon will be notified of this process.
So that's why Patreon says it's not MasterCard and it's not Visa, it's the bank?
Yeah, it's the bank.
So do you think that they just don't know that it's MasterCard and Visa? Do they just not know the business side? Because this is a huge company. You think they would, know how the business works.
I did find that interesting. Actually, I did find on JP Morgan's payment brand protection programs page why this was. And what they say on JP Morgan's PDF thing is that what information is shared with the impacted merchant. The merchant is notified via email of the termination. The email includes a citation of the specific clause of the merchant agreement that justifies termination. Disclosure of the identified brand damaging or illegal activity is not shared with the merchant. So they are getting a bit of the picture, but not the whole picture.
And that's only when they're punished.
And that's only when they're punished.
And so what are you implying that you, a 22-year-old YouTuber, have more information than the people at Patreon who are supposed to be doing this for their jobs?
Well, yeah.
Or are they just lying?
Well, they're not lying per se. I mean,
but I'm sorry. If I hire a hitman to kill a person, I did not technically kill the person, but I'm still going to be convicted for killing the person.
Yes.
So if Visa and MasterCard are literally orchestrating these programs, And they're the ones driving these programs and enforcing these programs and handing down. What's the penalty for the acquirer for a violation?
Oh, yeah, they do get so the acquirers have this obligation to MasterCard and they have to follow all of MasterCard's rules and policies. So that means if they mess up that they have to pay a fine, and these fines can be as high as 6 figures.
But I think honestly that's meaningless amount of money to a place like Bank of America.
Yeah.
But not being able to have credit. What would happen to Bank of America if they couldn't have debit cards anymore?
Was it Bank of America?
No, but I'm saying Bank of America could, just any. I was using it as an example.
Oh, okay.
So, J.P. Morgan was who you talked about.
No, I know.
And J.P. Morgan is Chase. That's a different bank.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
See, they all blend together for me.
Well, that's we have a lot fewer banks after the 2007-2008 financial crisis.
Oh,
we'll probably end up talking about that again later because of regulation. Unfortunately, it's sex positive economics with Annie.
Oh, jeez. I need to draw a dinosaur in like an accountant outfit.
No, you got to draw him as Mr. Moneybags from Monopoly with like the...
Oh my god, the monocle and the top hat. Does he wear a top hat?
I don't know if he wears a monocle. I know he wears a top hat.
No, he has to wear a monocle. Or
I don't know. Mr. Peanut wears a monocle. This could be, it's just, I don't know. We need to look him up. So you'll look him up and you will find pictures. Does Mr. Moneybags, I think that's his name, from Monopoly, wear a monocle?
Well, to be honest, Mr. Moneybags, I had no idea who you said until you said Monopoly. And I was like, oh, the Monopoly man.
Monopoly guy. I think that's his name. I don't know.
I think his name, I don't even know.
They'll tell us, they'll correct, they'll be, oh, this guy's so stupid, it's not Mr. Moneybags. His name is J.P. Weatherweather. I was like, I apologize,
So, anyways, if the acquirer is looking to save money, because 6 figures is a lot of money, while also not damaging their relationship with MasterCard, they will apply for a merchant monitoring partner, which is coincidentally suggested to do by MasterCard. So,
and I looked into these guys, and this is interesting. So this is MasterCard says that this is a third party company, but it's entirely certified by MasterCard, and it's enforcing MasterCard's policies and procedures. So I don't know how they count as a third party.
Yeah. It's a weird name, but well, it's probably just because MasterCard can point to them and be like, oh, it's their fault.
And you actually looked into a couple of these companies.
Yeah, one of the companies is the one that I'm going to use as an example for this podcast. Okay. It's called Legit Script. And I actually found a quote.
It's legit.
It's legit, yeah. I found a quote on their website, and it says that acquirers must properly classify high-risk merchants and ensure that their merchants are not processing illegal or brand-damaging transactions. Failure to do so can result in fines as high as 6 figures per transaction. However, acquirers who use a merchant monitoring partner, such as Legit Script, can qualify for fine mitigation of up to 75 to 100%.
And there are other penalties that they're excused from as well. And so now, as opposed to this just being Bram that's investigating, we now have all of these third-party companies that are now independently, 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 air quotes, independently investigating, which means that's more pressure on the acquirers, more pressure on the merchants like Patreon. And here's the other unforeseen consequence. If you're an acquirer, you're going to do your own investigations because you don't want Visa and MasterCard to come knocking on your door. You want to be on top of this. So they're going to be doing more investigations as well. And then, of course, Patreon doesn't want to be lose the ability to take Visa and MasterCard or have to pay higher percentages on transactions or fines. So they're going to be investigating more. So even though the process is supposed to be technically just MasterCard investigating, because of the pressure that's being put down upon the whole system, everybody's investigating. And I guess this is the best example I can come of is if you've got a boss who is insane about a certain thing, you don't want to get yelled at by your boss. You don't want to get fired. So you're going to become insane about a certain thing. And it's the funny thing about the new book about Activision, the Blizzard book.
Oh,
and,
yeah, you've talked to me about
well,
this.
and he completely misses the point. Bobby comes in, and Bobby's all about the bottom line. And just because Bobby doesn't tell you, all of these people are like mobsters. They don't have to explicitly tell you the thing for you to understand that you're going to do the thing. Oh, we need to worry about microtransactions and making more money and selling stupid mounts for $20 because otherwise Bobby's going to come in and take over. So it's funny how in that book he's blaming Blizzard executives for doing this behavior after Bobby comes in, but saying, oh, because Bobby didn't explicitly say it, and because Bobby hadn't completely taken over by that point, it was obviously them, and it had nothing to do with Bobby. That's either disingenuous, or that's, I'm not allowed to use that word. You don't like it when I use that word. So what's the other word I need to use? Stupid.
Yeah.
So, I think that this is a journalist writing this book, and he wants to maintain his relationships with all of these people. So if he can make these sociopaths who have ruined these companies look a little less, disgusting, it's good for his long term.
Yeah.
And I had no idea why. So it's just like, did the Japanese politicians understand that, yes, it was Visa and that Visa was lying to them? Or are they knowingly complicit, or were they just duped? Does Patreon know that MasterCard is behind this? Because they say, oh yeah, it wasn't MasterCard, it wasn't Visa. No, it was the bank. That's the acquirer. So either they don't know the process, and there needs to be more podcasts and videos and information
about this process
put together by extreme investigative journalists like the girl who reviews adult content games for most of her content coming in with this.
Listen.
I'm sorry, this is such a surreal experience.
I had to, dig deep to find out what this process was, and,
Well, a lot of these developers, and they're devastated by this.
Exactly.
They get banned by Patreon, they get kicked off of Steam.
Yeah, and if I can make this process easier to understand, then it's good for the whole industry.
Oh, that's very noble of you. I guess you have a financial incentive. If we can ever find out a way for you to make money off of this,
exactly,
there will be a financial incentive.
Yeah, I don't.
Someday.
Yeah, little Patreon plug here.
Yes. It's funny because we're talking about Patreon too. This is so meta.
It really is.
It's like we're like questioning if Patreon is competent at what it's doing while using the resources of Patreon. Totally not biting the hand that feeds you.
Yeah, whatever. But going back to the third-party merchant monitoring system, I do want to explain their process, because each system has their own process. Listen.
I thought this was a simple 3-step process.
It really isn't. It really isn't. And it's taken me a while to get to know this process. Okay, so sticking with my example that I used earlier, LegitScript. So how they monitor the merchants is that they will monitor the merchants daily, and then the reviewers that they have will flag products that they deem as problematic or brand damaging, and then they will send this report back to the acquirer, who will then make the final decision. They can also actually recognize brand patterns. So if a developer has their product taken down, say on itch.io, and they want to come back onto itch.io, then the merchant monitoring system for LegitScript will recognize them and not let them through. Okay. And this is not always the case.
Doesn't always work.
Yeah, it doesn't always work, but there is a chance that it will.
And I guess this could also apply to cross-platform stuff. But
Yeah.
I don't know how much information all these third parties are sharing with each other.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, Visa and MasterCard wouldn't let us know that.
Yeah, that's something I couldn't find out.
That is a trade secret.
Yeah.
And this is the hard thing for developers, because it's funny, when Steam rejects your game for sexual content, if Steam rejects your game for AI or for IP violation or for you're spacing, even spacing and stuff, they'll reject a game for.
Yeah.
They'll tell you exactly why.
Yeah.
But if Steam rejects your game for prohibited sexual content, you're not allowed to reapply the game ever. You're done.
Yeah.
And you can make a new game, but it can't be similar to the old game. And they'll tell you, we can't tell you specifically why we're rejecting your game.
Mm-hmm.
And that infuriates developers because developers are used to being able to work with Steam.
Yeah.
And if you push back, sometimes Steam will say more information and they'll say, oh, it's because we don't want to give specific information because we don't want to help developers learn how to get around the rules and make something that's just okay enough to get through. Mm-hmm. We want something to be totally not close to the line. Whatever the line is, we're not going to tell you the line is.
Yeah, exactly.
And so
some vague line.
MasterCard and Visa are not going to ever tell you what the line is, tell you what is brand damaging.
Well, yeah, because why would they?
What the hell does that even mean? And there is a cultural component to this. Are we going to cover the cultural component to this?
I think at the end.
Okay, all right.
Maybe.
All right, maybe.
So we talked about the financial consequences, like fines and not being able to take Visa and MasterCard. You know, that's what happened to DL Site, a Japanese company selling lawful products to Japanese citizens. That's why the two Japanese officials went to Visa's headquarters. Visa was inflicting their moralities and policies on a country that already has their own moralities and policies. So Visa didn't technically lie, but they kind of did.
No, they did. They did.
Okay.
Just because they hired the hitman does not mean that they're not responsible for it. We're not going to tolerate that weasel. They did. They lied.
Okay. On Taro Yamada's tweet, he said that we received a clear statement from the head office manager that they had never issued instructions to restrict transactions using specific terms. So they, Visa, personally never did. But they're saying, oh, it's not us, it's the monitoring system. Yeah, it's the same monitoring system that is run by Visa. So when Patreon is asked about why this is happening, they will tell you it's not Visa or MasterCard, but it really is. MasterCard has this chokehold on the entire companies, and they're enforcing policies that reflect their opinions, their morals, their ideologies. And the fact that the world is being controlled by a small select group of people should not be happening.
It's always been that way. I know.
I know. It's just makes my brain circuit. It's just like
we can be a little bit better. We can work to be a little bit better. We can't fix everything, but maybe we can make it a little less shitty.
Yeah. Hopefully, that would be nice.
So you mentioned Patreon, and I know Patreon has been doing this as an ongoing process.
Yeah, I mean, it's really been happening since 2017 with that huge Patreon crackdown. Mm-hmm. And Patreon continues to this day to censor and ban more flavors. And I did want to talk about how Patreon is now banning games based on the shape of penises. The recent...
All right, that's... Okay, hold on.
What?
All right.
Was that too much?
No, it's fine.
It was just the
all right.
0 to 60 kind of moment.
Well, how did we get there?
So Seeds of Chaos, it's a game that's been on Patreon since 2016, has had a recent suspension. And they're back on Patreon, but they did make a post about this, and they said that in order to get the page reinstated, I had to remove all of the content from the feed here on Patreon, as well as some Patreon builds of the game. It is no longer available in the versions downloadable currently, and it will not appear in any future Patreon builds.
Did they take out Minotaur sex?
Yeah, they took out everything. Like they had to just scrap everything that had different shaped penises.
So would this literally and figuratively be bullshit?
I guess so, yeah. And when I saw this, I was like, oh gosh, what are they going to do to other games? Like Carnal Instinct, like Wildlife.
Don't give them ideas. Don't give them ideas.
I know. It's just so annoying.
So, and it is interesting to see, because if you look at where the people in charge are coming from, they are disproportionately represented by a very small percentage of the population of the United States of America, and they're disproportionately represented by a very small percentage of India.
Yeah.
And it is interesting to see, because with that information, if you know who exactly this is, and we do know who exactly it is, but your mom and I said you are not allowed to share that information. So, but if you look at what their cultures are, if you look at what their faiths are, it is obvious that there are certain flavors that are getting passes based on their own personal ideologies, whereas if this was being regulated in Japan or in Saudi Arabia or in
different.
Brazil or any number of other places, or Russia, it would different things would be seen as acceptable and not acceptable.
Yeah, because it's just a different country. Every country has their own morals.
Yeah. But it's not even that it's a different country. But... It's a very teeny sliver of these two countries.
Okay. Well.
So it's interesting to see. So
yeah.
So what can consumers do? What can developers do?
Well, so developers, I guess I can start with. I do think it's important for developers to know how their content is being regulated by MasterCard, and I think it will help them to better understand their situation. You know, this is not Patreon. Yeah, Patreon can be kind of shit at communicating with developers.
Please subscribe to Andy's Patreon.
Just another pop-up. But they are as much as a victim here as developers are.
Has anyone from Patreon ever actually talked to you?
No. I don't know. Yeah. I'm thinking about it. No. Maybe.
I wonder how big you have to get on Patreon for them to talk to you.
I don't know. Dark cookie big. Maybe
you're never getting.
I'm never going to get that big.
I'm not trying to. I mean, yes, you can get there if you try hard enough and if you believe.
If you believe.
Got some pixie dust for you.
Oh my god. Yeah, I have to make a wish on a star. Some Disney shit. But yeah, that's not what this video is about. It's about, letting you guys know what the process is. And the process is bound to change to be more restrictive before it gets better. But at least developers will know what is happening behind the scenes. And I mean, the two Japanese officials who went to Visa's headquarters show that this is a level of misunderstanding that Visa and MasterCard has honestly inflicted onto the world, and how it has affected everyone, even other governments.
Yeah. It's interesting because I don't know how I would feel as an American if some other country came in and restricted what I, as an American, could buy from another American company that was legal to buy in America.
Yeah.
And like somebody from France came in and said, "Oh no, you can't do that." I think I would be very grumpy about that.
Yeah, grumpy. Yeah. I imagine that. Yeah, most people would be.
Yeah, and it's not even like another country. It's just a corporation. It's like, who the hell elected you?
Yeah, I know exactly. Like, so why are you here? But let's see, for a consumer, you mentioned that. So credit cards are the safest and most convenient way to make purchases online, and will probably continue to be. But I think knowing, again, who is in charge of pulling the strings is most important for a consumer, and is one step closer to fully understanding this situation. And like you said before, I've looked into this, and you guys are saying that I can't say anything, which is understandable. I don't want to say anything.
It's funny because they're very proud of working, in Toronto.
Oh, okay.
And if you want to look them up on LinkedIn, they're there. But I don't think going after them is going to accomplish anything. In the long term, it could cause short-term inconvenience, and that's one of the things that I see online. Like, people will mention a person, or people will mention an employee, or people will mention a small company, and all of the ire will be directed at those individuals, and those individuals are just cogs in the machine. They're effectively meaningless to the process, but people feel like they've championed justice by going after them.
Yeah, it's like going after like a cash register person, and it's like why are we
cash register person?
What are they called?
Cashiers.
We're cutting that out.
No, you gotta leave that in. That's great.
No,
that's great. It's great. Cash register person.
No, that's gonna make me seem spoiled.
No, it shows you how much you leave the house. You're like,
oh no,
you don't like. Your hikikomori is showing.
Yeah.
I think that I think we can say, look, okay, the former head of MasterCard is now the head of the World Bank.
Yeah, AJ Banga. He is the former CEO of MasterCard, and, he went and became the president of the World Bank. So these people have, an insane amount of power and influence, even more than some countries and politicians.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think that, and the people who are in power are most interested in remaining in power.
Well, yeah.
The people who have access and affluence want to continue to have access and affluence. Mm-hmm. They don't care about our problems, and they don't care about adult content games. Mm-hmm. What they do care about is, some random sheriff sending them a letter and causing 4 years of, economic loss and bills getting passed and all of this extra. How many millions and millions and millions of dollars did that cost Visa and MasterCard to deal with that nonsense?
Yeah.
And now there was some real issues that needed to be addressed, absolutely, but most of it was nonsense. And it's hard to sift through what is a real problem and what is not a real problem.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, the shape and size of a minotaur penis should never be on anyone's list of things that we need
to take care of. It's like where are we going, guys? It's the bottom of the barrel. they're like, oh yeah, we'll grab onto that one because that makes the most sense.
Because it's easy to hold.
Yeah, it's big. It's an easy target. Oh God. Oh man.
I know there's some information that you're going to share. I know some of the information we've told you can't because we don't want Visa and MasterCard to come after you for sharing.
Yeah, I'm going to share everything that is available to the public in the post. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to retain some of the information just in case, Visa and MasterCard come to sue me. Also, do you hear these birds?
Yeah. It's raining.
Yeah.
And the birds are singing.
Yeah, you can really tell that we're in a jungle.
Yeah, well, I heard the chickens.
You did?
Yeah, I don't know if they'll be on.
I don't think so. Yeah, it's just...
The roosters.
It's just a bird that's, really close to the window, and it's really loud.
There was also a study, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was a study that I found from 2023. It's called the Algorithmic Moderation of Sexual Expression, Pornhub, Payment Processors, and CSAM. And I just thought it was a really cool article to read. I don't really agree with all of the conclusions in it, but... And at this point, I'm pretty sure that no one exactly knows how the system now works, even at Visa and MasterCard.
God.
So
the system is so big that nobody knows how knows how all the parts. I do think that there are a lot of implications. Like for example, with whenever you start using third-party agencies that are completely beholden to you, those can't be third-party agencies. And this is what we saw with the 2007-2008 financial crisis. The ratings bureaus that were supposed to be rating the bonds, AAA, B, whatever, they were financially beholden to those bond issuers.
Oh.
So if you didn't give them a AAA rating or a AA rating, they would go and get that rating from another. They were video game companies. So we've talked about this before. The websites like IGN and everything else. Where does all their advertising come from? The video games they sell. The video games that are being sold.
Oh, okay.
So are you going to review the Activision game low when Activision is buying most of your ad space?
Oh, okay. So yeah. IGN is.
Well, no, but I'm not trying to pick on any of them specifically.
No, I know.
And the reason why this happens over and over and over again is because we don't teach game theory in elementary schools, so people don't realize
that's
all of this stuff makes sense when you look at it from a who's motivated to win, who's motivated to lose, and this is just a situation where we have, once again, a very small percentage of the population is enforcing its morality on the rest of the planet. And that's always happened. But at least knowing who those people are and at least knowing how they're doing it will allow your community and your audience the choice on how they want to respond to that.
Yeah.
If they want to tolerate it, if they don't care. It sounds like they really care about this in Japan, and hopefully, people in Japan will hear this and listen to it and do their own investigation and find this out. And see, it sounds to me like Visa and MasterCard don't respect Japanese culture and don't respect Japanese law and don't respect Japanese citizens, and they think that they are beneath them. That seems to be what their behavior is showing, because why would they have deceived them? But that's for them to decide.
If you enjoyed this episode of Shame Free Gaming, be sure to check out my YouTube channel, my Patreon, and my Discord. I'll link to all of the resources I used on my Patreon page, and I will see you next time.